Okay, hold on. We might be good now. Um, yeah, it was not registering any sound there for a second. Let me know if you can hear me. Looks like it should be working now. Okay. Uh, Hi everybody. Yeah, that's good. My mic was on, it was connected. I just was not getting any sort of audio input, so sorry for that. But if you look in the chat, you can see I have a link to a Patreon site. That's my Patreon. I don't use it very much yet, but I plan to in the future. They just gave me access to new features that let me share files for free. So you don't have to be a patron to download them. And I've actually shared this blend file that I have on the screen. So if you click on that link, it should take you right to that download. And I'm not sure if you have to be a member or not. And I think a member is a new term there, which you can be a member without paying now. And that's new. That's brand new today. They just gave me that. So if you want to go get this file, go get it. Otherwise, I'll share these images on their own, and you can put them in the scene if you like. But this is the scene that I'm going to start modeling this character with. So what you have on the screen is the easiest way to start a 3D character model, I think, and it's just to have references from all directions, and the camera set up so that these should be very, very close to the same height. So if I slide these images toward each other, you should be able to see um, they're pretty similar. I might scale that one a little. And mostly I'll just use it as like kind of a reference, but um, it's also nice to be able to look in multiple directions and have a consistent reference that's not really 3D, but kind of with these separate images. Um, Looks like my bit rate's poor for the moment. Let me know if the picture quality isn't great. YouTube's giving me some bitrate errors here. Gotta love it. All right. Let's see. Yeah, so if you want this reference file, go to that link. If it doesn't seem to work, let me know. It's a brand new feature on Patreon, and you should be able to get the file for free. Um, Otherwise, I am gonna just get started here, and um, yeah, let's just get to it. So I am gonna lock all of these images in the scene so I don't accidentally select them. And I'm actually going to turn off this rear view image right now because it's going to just be distracting. So now we just have the front view. The way I set this scene up, I just took renders of this character and then added them as a reference image. And then I moved them around. So now I have front, side, and rear views of the model so that I can kind of try to trace it. And we're just going to start with the cube and get to modeling. So if you're brand new to Blender, this might be slightly fast. I think there's still plenty that you could learn from it, but it's definitely not going to feel like familiar yet. If you're intermediate, this will probably be fairly easy. But I'm going to align my view to the Y forward direction. So we're looking at the front view of the character. And then I'm just going to hold, actually, let's turn on screencast here. That way you can see my mouse and keyboard commands. I'm going to hit Shift A to add a mesh, and we're going to add a cube. And actually, I'm going to make a new collection up here, and we'll call it, let's move it to the scene, and we will call it low poly Minotaur. And then we're going to move our cube into that folder so that the character model is inside the right collection. Okay. And then we're going to rename this cube. We'll just say Minotaur body. Okay, and then I'll scale it down. It might be helpful to make sure, since we haven't moved this cube at all, make sure that the cube is aligned to 0 in the X direction. The Y direction won't matter, and the Z won't really matter, but we want to make sure that our reference image lines up sideways with our the model that we're creating. What are your plans for a low poly version of your character? Oh, that's probably a good question to answer, huh? So the plan with this character is to use the 3D model that I already have on these reference images and to create a low poly version of it using modeling. And then we'll go through UV unwrapping, texturing, rigging, and animation. So we'll do all of that in a few parts here. But the ultimate goal for the character itself will be either like some sort of game, probably. Yeah, at very least, I'll be trying to put some characters into like Unreal Engine and either animating or making a game in there. But ultimately, I'd like to make a game someday. And so this character and a few others that I'll do the same thing with are going to end up in a game, I hope. And it's going to be a lot easier to get low poly stuff going than these high detail ones that I've made. So I'm going to start off with learning on that. But yeah, I wouldn't say this is necessarily like a game asset tutorial yet because I think I'm not quite to the point where I know how to do all of that process yet. But I think this is kind of the first step in that direction. So yeah, so hopefully a game, at least some fun little low poly animations. Okay, so what I need to do right now is try to get the reference image to line up with the cube. That actually looks really, really close. And then I'll lock that again so we can't select the reference image. Okay, and then obviously if you go download the file that I provided, you'll have to make those tweaks a little bit on your own, but what I've done is aligned the reference to the cube so that the cube is centered on the X direction. So anything that we mirror on the sideways direction is going to be copied properly to the reference. We don't want like this to happen to where you start modeling and then if we mirror this to the other side, it's not going to line up with anything. So definitely want to make sure your cube and your reference are at 0. Yeah, so you can start with any shape you think fits. And normally when you start modeling, you would just pick something that's almost the right shape to begin with. But we're just going to start with a good old cube. And then we're also actually going to move the side view over here. And we'll move it back so that it lines up with the cube in this direction. And this one doesn't matter too much. It's just to make sure that we can look forward and sideways to try to get an idea of what the 3D version will look like. And feel free to move the references around as you feel like you need to. For now, I'll leave it, I'll leave it further back so it's not right in the way, and we'll start with the front view. And then we'll go to the side view, and eventually I'll move this side reference up closer, and we'll kind of use both of these at the same time. But for now, we'll start in the front. So I'm going to select the cube, and I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode, or you can use this drop-down box. And then I'm just going to start moving around vertices to try to trace the shape of the character. So I'm going to turn on this button up here is X-ray mode. If I do that, it lets me see through the cube so that I can see my reference image behind the cube. And also doing that will allow me to select other vertices through the reference image. So as long as we stay aligned and we're looking directly past both of these corners, I'll be able to select them. Same with like this, for example. See, I've selected both of them. So if I want to move the whole top edge here, then I can just by selecting that corner. So I am going to start placing these points. And one thing we can do already is we can try to enable the mirror in the X direction. I just did that by clicking this little X mesh symmetry button up here. So now anything I do on one side will translate to the other side. And there's not necessarily a lot of strategy to this process other than just try to do your best and think about what the shape of this will be in 3D. And eventually, if you do this a few times, you'll learn how to optimize it as you go. But for now, we're going to start just kind of following the edges. And the goal of this with low poly, the reason we're not sculpting and retopologizing is we're going to try to start with a really good quality low poly model so that we don't have to retopologize. If I was going to make a high poly model like my normal characters, I would just be sculpting like crazy and I would fix it later. But here we're going to try to start off with a good one. So we're not going to do that. So I've got my cube placed for the first setup. And now what I'll do after this is pretty quick. So I'm going to select this entire top face here. You can see all four corners are selected. And I'm going to use E to extrude, and then S to scale. And then I can use G just like normal to move the points around. And they're still following that mirror. So I can move just one side in and out and both sides will move. And I'm just gonna start to trace the shape of the character. And there's plenty of time to adjust this later. So don't worry about getting it perfect or anything. We will tweak it, and you'll see that we need to tweak it anyway from the side views. So don't get too concerned with perfection yet. But basically what we want to do is just block out the front of the character from this view and get it as close as we can for now. Let's do that. And then at some point here, we're going to have to start to add some extra topology so that we can split to go to the legs and arms and everything. But really, you can already see it's starting to be the general shape of a torso. And all we had to do was trace it. So far, nothing too hard to do. I think at this point, I want to try to maybe split the geometry a little bit. So I'm going to hold Control and hit R. And that brings up this yellow line. And if I scroll the mouse wheel, it adds extra lines. what it's doing is allowing me to add a loop right there. So I'm going to go out to the side a little. If I hit Control R again, you can see it's going to make loops that go around the front and back of the body. So let's actually just hit Control R. It starts with one loop, and then if you left click, it'll keep that loop. Okay, and I'll Control Z to go back here, and I'll hit Control R one more time. While this is ready to go, normally you can move these loops around, but since we have the mirror set on, it's not going to let me do that. So I'll just place the one loop there, and now I have a split down the middle. And what that has done is it's given me extra topology to work with on the sides. And throughout this, you'll see me tapping 1, 2, or 3, and that just changes the mesh selection option. So 1 is the same as clicking this box, which lets you pick points. This one lets you pick edges, and this one lets you pick faces. So 1, 2, or 3 do the same thing. But now since I've split this model, I have 2 separate sides right here, and those are what I'm going to use to start the legs. So let's do that. So I'm going to grab one of these planes. I'm going to realign to the Y direction, and I'm going to hit E to extrude. And we're just going to do a really general one. We'll come back and add more topology later. Oh, okay. Yeah, now see, we're going to start to get into problems with the mirror mode. So let me undo that. We are probably going to have to stop using this mode here, and we'll have to enable the mirror modifier, because Blender is not going to like trying to do complex adding of geometry like this. So let's turn this checkbox off up here, and I'm going to go back to object mode. Okay, so you can hit tab or just use the drop down up here. Select the body, come to this little tool, which is the modifier properties. Click on that, drop down, add modifier, and we're going to add a mirror modifier. And we'll put it in the X direction. Okay, so now if I go into edit mode, I should be able to just extrude. Yeah. Okay. So all I did was I added this modifier, leave it on, don't change any settings, make sure you're mirroring around X. Select just one of the 2 planes, and then everything you do will work the right way. So we'll go back to just using E to extrude, and then G to move. I'm going to use R to rotate these planes, and I'm going to place right in the middle here. I'll hit S to scale, and I'll keep doing this process. So one thing I've already noticed is we need to bring this line down a little, so that's fine. I'll hit G and then Z just to move it downward. And you can see we already kind of have a general like nice little transition here from the upper body to the legs. Then I'm going to select this plane again, go back to the front view, E, G to move, S to scale, R to rotate, and I'm just going to try to trace the general shape of this as well as I can. Now I know from experience I'm going to need a lot of topology around the knees and these joints. So just because I know that, I'm going to add a little extra as I go, but we can always come back and add it in between these loops, so that won't be a problem for now. So let's just keep going. We'll just keep tracing away. Scale. Okay, and if I want to select this whole loop to move it, I can hold Alt and then click on it. So Alt plus left mouse button selects the whole edge loop. So like this. See, it selects that loop, but I have to be in I believe the vertices or the uh, edge select mode for that to work very well. Otherwise, if you want to do a loop of planes like this, you can select a whole loop of planes and there. And it can do this. But I don't want that, I just want the edge. So I'll alt select that, scale it out, move it this way, alt select that, maybe move it over here, scale it a little bit, just to try to shape that leg a little better. It's going to be a little easier if we start with a better model, but it's not really going to matter. Okay, so now I can select this face again and just keep going. Let's go in the middle here, scale, rotate, E, scale. Again, here's another spot. I know I need a lot of detail, but I'm not going to add it quite yet. So we'll just start with that. That'll be close enough. Okay, so if you look from the side view, we kind of have the shape of a body already. So let's just keep going. We'll do his neck in a minute. Let's maybe start with his arms. So what we probably want to do here is select this. Oops, let's go to edge select mode. Select this loop. If you hit G, this loop will move. If you hit G again, it will lock all of the vertices to stay on their lines. So I can just slide this whole loop up and down, and it stops at the next set of loops, which is super, super convenient. So I'm actually going to stop this. Let's just stop it up here. Okay, and then we have this entire face over here to work with. I'm not sure that I want to grab that much for the shoulder and the arm, so I'm going to add a loop around the side here. So I'm going to hit Control R again. It's going to give me the option to make loops. I think I'm actually going to make two, so I'll scroll up on the mouse wheel. And now you can see I'm able to move these because the mirror isn't causing any problems. Now, if you want them to stay centered, you can just right click and they'll go to where they were, but then you have to left click to unselect, and now we have a loop there. So let's turn off this front view so far, and you can see this is what the mesh already looks like. So we're on the right track for sure. But now, if I come select this, I have the perfect little shape to start with the arm. So I'm going to go back to front view, extrude again, and I'll do a couple extra loops in the shoulder because I just know that we'll need them. So more E, scale, rotate. And there's always going to be time to fix our topology even without redoing it later. So some of these angles aren't great, but we'll fix it. One thing to note is where you have joints, like elbows, you're probably going to want extra edge loops. Even if we don't have them now, we can subdivide later, or we can add extra loops. So it's not a big deal not to right now, but it's just something to think about doing. And since this is low poly, we definitely don't want to be going overboard. So I have to try to resist the urge to do way too much topology. Okay, so we'll do hands and feet and extra little details like that later. For now, I'm going to save this blend file. All right, so now you can see we've got something started here. It's looking all right. Okay, so now let's do a little bit up here on the neck. Again, we've already got this center plane here that's ready to go, so we'll use that. We'll hit E to extrude, and now for this you have to imagine we're gonna build the neck and then we're gonna add the head later. So just kind of trace the shape of what you think the neck would look like, and then when you scale like that, it's going to bring a gap into here. Obviously, you don't want a gap, so if you move this, you can see we're crossing the center. We don't want that, so come over here and turn on clipping. And now when that happens, the vertices at the middle there will just merge. Okay, so we're gonna extrude a couple more times. Maybe at this point start to look at the side view. See, have a long neck that goes up to the back of his head, so we'll actually come up to like here. So let's extrude one more time. Maybe scale it in a little more. And we'll start with that. All right. So let's turn our front view reference off one more time. And it looks a little obnoxious, but really you can kind of see the shape of the body forming already. So yeah, not doing so bad. Turn back on our front view. At this point, I would say a good idea is to start working on the side view. So let's rotate our view now. So click on the little X button on the gizmo here. And to do this, you'll want to set your X-ray mode back on. So now one cool trick, if you don't want to move all of these, you can just scale some of them. So let's go back to edge mode. And then if you hold Alt and then click a loop, you'll select the whole loop. Okay, so we'll do that. And then we can just start scaling these in. And now it might look good from this side to scale this point right here. But if I do that, it's also going to scale in this direction. We don't want that. So let's Control Z to undo that. So I'm going to hit scale again. And now I can bind it to a direction. Since our X direction is already good, let's bind it to Y direction only. Okay, so I'll scale it in until it touches the body, and then we'll look again. And now from the front, you can see that it didn't make the model thinner this way. Okay, so what we did was we just told Blender to scale only in the Y direction. Okay, so we're going to keep doing that for each of these loops. Okay, and I'm going to use the same. I'm going to use G to move, S to scale, R to rotate, anything I think I need to. But mostly we're just going to use G and S. So move and scale. And I realized this loop I just actually accidentally scaled in the wrong way. So now I actually liked it in the Y direction, so I'm actually going to lock it to X scale now to fix this one. See? So even if you make a mistake, don't worry, we can fix it. Okay, and then there's some spots on here where the topology is kind of wiggly. Don't worry about that. We'll get to that later too. No matter what method you use to model, you're not going to end up with something perfect the first time. So really just focus about like learning the general form. You know, you're not going to get perfect topology, but there's ways to fix it later. So don't spend too much time worrying about it. Now we have enough topology here at the top, kind of in this chest area, that Blender doesn't know how to select this entire loop. So we can hold shift and select each one of these pieces if we want to. That is a little bit tedious though. I guess we don't have too many points yet, so let's just go ahead and do that for now. But if your Control R to select edge loop doesn't work anymore, then that's one of the only ways you can do it. Okay. Scale on the Y. Now this is going to start to affect different parts, so it may be worth it to plan this a little more. But I think for now, let's bring this loop out. Okay, so let's just select this guy, and then we'll hit GY. Actually, let's hit G again. So now we're bound to just moving it along um, the lines. Okay, so we just want to form up the shape of the neck a little more. And you can do this by just selecting the planes you want to move to. So there's no reason that you have to be selecting just loops. So we could just come grab this one, G, Y, and then these here are kind of just a little goofy area. So here you can see we're starting to get some goofy topology because there's this object here. It doesn't know what shape to make that. So at this point, we're going to have to start planning our modeling just a little bit more up here. So what I'm actually going to do is we want to keep all the loops we already have. So definitely don't want to be making triangles already. I haven't mentioned it yet, but we're going to try to model everything in quads, which are four-sided objects. So every face we want to be a quad. So we're going to have to play with these shapes just a little. Let's undo this move here. And really this loop is just starting to cause problems, so I'm tempted to cheat and use some topology tricks, but we're not going to do it yet because that's not helpful. So what I'm going to do instead is go to vertex select mode and move this back a little. Just going to give a better transition into the shoulder area. Okay, and we'll have extra topology here, but again, we'll fix it. We'll fix it in a little bit. And how come this doesn't have a vertex? That is just weird. It looks like the mirror modifier is ignoring me on this exact location. Huh. Well, that's just wonderful. See if we can figure out what we did there. Okay. So for some reason, this shape and this shape are no longer the same. See if we can figure that out. Because really, we shouldn't have to worry about that. If we move this point, it should move the same point on the other side. And it just looks like it's having to create a new vertex there. So what might have happened is at some point this got too close to the center, but let's just model this side for now and not worry about that, and I'll show you why. We can use the mirror modifier later to correct this. So let's just not worry about it. I'm gonna go back to the side view here, and I'm gonna move this all out here. And this is gonna really start to make our topology angry. So at some point we're just gonna have to start adding extra loops. Or we could just collapse these. Yeah, let's do that. So if you have anything selected in edit mode, you can hit X and then you can delete it. So I'm going to delete this face. And that is also suspicious. Delete face. Wow, look at that. Yeah. Well, there's our problem. Blender added an extra little shape in here for us. I'm not even sure how it did that. Well, that's nice. Okay. Gotta love Blender, right? So let's go back to object mode real fast. And let's shade this thing smooth. You can see it's kind of the shape of a body already. It's getting there a little bit. But we have this weird topology problem happening. So one other way we can fix this is go back into edit mode. Um, hit A to select all. Come up to I believe it's mesh, and then you can somewhere in here there's symmetrize. If you hit that, it brings up a little menu down here, and you can tell it what direction to go to. So we want to go positive X to minus X. Okay, so now if you do that, anything that didn't match on the negative side over here is going to disappear because it's going to copy the positive X side, which to us is left over here, and it's going to apply that to the right side. So I'll click out, and that should have applied that operation. Really, really not sure why it added extra detail here, but we've corrected it now. Um, and there's still no planes in here for some reason, even though we had added those back in. So I'll just go ahead and replace those. Okay, so I'm going to select 3 sides. You could do 2 and then hit F, and it'll fill that back in. If that didn't work for you, or if it doesn't work, you just need to make sure you have the F2 add-on enabled. And if you need to know how to do that, just let me know. But the F2 add-on comes with Blender, so it's not something that you have to go get. Okay. Yeah, so it definitely doesn't like us adding anything there. Let's try to move this vertex out a little. For some reason, we're snapping a lot. Might be just because we have clipping turned on. Yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah, Blender just really doesn't like this topology here. It kind of looks like we might have some duplicates. So I'm actually going to hit A again and hit M for merge, and then just by distance, and just turn this up a little bit. Yep, there's nothing overlapping, so we're good there. Okay. I think we'll just keep working on the general form. Let's take this loop in a lot. Okay, so we'll start to scale it by Y, and then we'll move it by Y. Take this plane, scale by Y, move by Y. We're getting all kinds of fun topology today, guys. I am going to try to move some of these points around because I'm not sure why it's It's misbehaving so much. Vector slide. Huh. Okay, looks like our mirror modifier is actually the culprit here. So let's undo the last couple of little changes we made. All right, I'm going to go back to object mode. Um, and I think now that we're done splitting the geometry, so let's just, for now, let's just apply this. Okay, so since I don't have to make arms that come out of the side anymore, it should be fairly easy to deal with this now. And I'll just turn back on this mirror mode. Yeah, and it's got, see, it's created duplicates. So let's select all again. Hit M for merge by distance. Yeah, and it basically just copied everything because we applied the modifier. But I've merged them, so now there's no duplicates. And we should be better off now. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So now I'm just going to start moving lines again, and you don't have to stay locked in the side view or the front view. Just remember that everything's relative to how your camera views the scene. So um, if you want to lock to a certain direction, like just remember to hit G and then Y. Otherwise, you'll be moving, like if I just click and drag, it's going to move stuff off to the side as well, even though you won't realize it. So don't do that. Okay, now one problem I already see here is we have kind of a weird situation at the arm here. So I'm going to take this point. I'm going to move it out. And again, we're trying to maintain quads everywhere. If we're starting to get a situation where we need more detail, we'll just add a loop. Okay, and this actually is going to be all right. Let's grab this guy and pull it in. Let's maybe do that a little bit. Okay, now let's go back to side view and let's look through. Okay, so he's definitely got too much of a chest there. Okay, now here I've created these little corners. Um, it's gonna tempt us to try to make a triangle there eventually, and we want to avoid those. So at this point, I would just come in here, delete these faces, okay, and then let's see, you should still have. Oh, we put faces in the middle too. Get rid of these. Get rid of that. It should let us just fill these lines together. So what you can do if you have the F2 add-on enabled, select two vertices, hit F, it'll create a line or a edge between. So I'm going to do that here and here. And then I'm actually going to go back into edge select mode, and I am going to, let's see, doesn't want me to do that. I'm going to select these and fill them. Okay, and then I'm going to take this vertice or this line and move it up. Okay, so now we don't have that triangle happening. We do have this, which is still a quad. It's just going to be a little harder to figure out. So we'll do that in a second. But I'm going to merge everything one more time. Remove three vertices. So now there's no duplicate lines there. Okay, now it'll let us move this point back down. All right, now topology is very irritating because you can either get it right the first time or you have to chase your tail a lot. Here, instead of trying to make this shape work, I'm just going to add one edge loop. So let's turn off the front view reference here to get it out of the way. And you can see that we probably need some extra topology up here anyway. Stuff is stretching out a lot. So I'll just hit Control R and try to place it around the middle there. And what this will allow us to do is just make our corners a little bit more round, so we don't have to fight with triangles. Okay, I'll turn the front view on and go back to X-ray. And I'm in edge select mode, so just start placing spots again. Okay, and some of these points will probably not be in the right spot later, but we'll fix them once we need to. For now, they'll be okay. Okay, so let's go back. Let's start going back down. Um, let's just do it by loops here. Okay, so I'm just going to scale and move, over and over. And don't forget to bind your movement directions so you don't have to swap things out. So here I'll scale by Y. That looks pretty good. Select this loop, scale by Y, and just try to follow the shape of the body. Now I know that this set of lines right here is important because it's where the legs split off. So I have to be extra careful with that line. Let's just select it and we'll move it down a little. That'll help us kind of create the form of the body there. That's one spot that's really important because the flow of the model has to transition from being one shape to two shapes, and it just happens in the same spot on a character with two legs. So whereas the arms have their own little area to shoot off from, the legs don't. So it makes it a different game. Okay, so now Our side view is not going to be quite as helpful, so I'm going to just do it a little more um, freely with the camera. But I'm going to scale this only in Y, and then move in Y. Scale in Y, move in Y. And this process definitely takes a lot of trying it and then peeking, see if it worked. GY, SY, GY. Okay, that's starting to work just fine, actually. I've always called this method of um, modeling like 3D tracing, because to me it seems like you're using an image to just kind of make the shape. You don't have to be too creative with it at first. Um, so here, if you look at this reference image on the side, you can see the leg kind of has extra bends in it. So to do that, we don't want our topology to necessarily stay level like this. This loop needs to follow the direction of the flow better. So I'm going to rotate this loop. And I'll just rotate, let's just rotate around X for now. So I'll just hit R for rotate and then X. Okay, and then S to scale it back in. And we'll check that. And that kind of, it's starting to make sense, but let me do a couple more loops and you'll see. Okay, so this one we actually have to move back quite a bit. So I'll scale that, rotate X, scale a little bit, move a bit. That's probably okay. And you just keep tracing, keep moving down. I'm going to rotate this one a little. Scale. Okay. And then I can see that in the front view, I had rotated it one way that I didn't want to, so I'm going to just actually go back, rotate X again, scale Y. Let's scale by, okay, that'll kind of work. And it really just depends on if you want a certain look or whatever. You know, with lower poly models, there's a lot of extra like stylizing that goes to it. So at any point, you know, just feel free to experiment and do what you think looks cool. I'm always going to still be a high poly character guy at heart, probably, just because I think it's crazy that you can get stuff to look as real as you can now, just at home. But definitely do whatever you want to do with it. Okay. All right. Now, um, we'll have to do a little more corrections in the front view, but let's go back to object mode real fast. Let's hide our reference image, take it out of X-ray, but now you can see there's already kind of a shape of a body here. Now, hopefully you're kind of giggling at it because it's funny, but um, you know, this is not real far away from where we want it to be. So a couple minor corrections. This will be a really nice starting point. So let's turn our reference back on. Okay, and let's work on the top a little more. Go back to edit mode, X-ray mode on. Okay, now up here around the arms and chest, I can see that my arm is offset. It's too far forward. And that kind of makes sense because it looks like it's sitting forward on the model here. So I might start to try to correct that. That one might be a little harder. So what I might do in this kind of situation is just select all of this. Okay, so I've selected the entire arm. And then we'll leave the shoulder area for now. And um, yeah, you can even see how the topology kind of is pushed forward too much anyway. But I'm going to select this whole arm, side view, x-ray mode, and then I'm going to look through the model and see that the arm is back over here and our model has it too far forward. So I'm going to hit GY, move it back, just so it's a lot closer to what the image shows. Turn x-ray off. We'll check that out. See, that's already looking a lot better. Okay, now I see this loop here isn't doing us a lot of good. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't just get rid of it, but that will cause problems if we do that. So yeah, that might work for now. We don't want triangles. Um, so let's actually delete this face. Okay, and it looks like it's only going to let us do it, on each side because we're in edit mode. The mirror modifier would have done that for us, but it's not going to let us. So I'm actually going to come up here and turn on the snap. But if you pull down this arrow, it'll show you different options of things to snap onto. I'm going to select vertex. Okay, and then click out of the little menu. And then if you click this on, it'll snap. So if I grab this vertex, when I get close to another one, it'll just snap to it. Okay, so now that I've done that, I got rid of our weird little stretch area, and this is still a quad. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what we want, but I have to merge these vertices, otherwise we'll be moving just one at a time. And I'm actually going to turn snap mode off because I don't want to accidentally use it later. And then just make sure you have both of the vertex at that spot selected. So here I don't. The way you can tell is because all the lines will be yellow. So I'll turn on X-ray mode again. Doing that lets you select mesh through mesh. So if your lines aren't selecting, your overlap vertices aren't all selected. Just turn that back on and peek through the model and make sure you're not grabbing anything behind it. Because like this one back here would go with it if we let it. But just grab where you think you have additional ones, merge by distance, M, click by distance, and if they're overlapping, it'll tell you at the bottom you removed a vertice, and it basically just collapses them into one new one. So now you've got this kind of weird little situation going on here. So let's bring this back. Now we can realign all of these with our edge loop in the middle. And let's pull this one back. Let's see. Actually, that one's not too bad. We might wait on it. Yeah, we'll wait on that one actually. And then let's just keep going with the arm a little bit. So I think if we turn on X-ray mode again, it looks like our arm's basically aligned with the picture as well as we can tell. So let's just start pulling the chest back as much as we can. GY. And there's some other modeling tools that I'll talk about just briefly as we go. But I don't want to just throw like 700 tools at you in this video because if you're not used to it, you don't really need them. We're not going to learn every tool in this series. So I'll mention them in passing when I need them, but try not to be too much info all at once. Um, Finboy Slick says, "Where's the beef?" Well, nowhere yet. We're getting there though. We're getting there. Um, yeah, this is not looking too bad, but let's start to get the neck shaped up a little more. Okay, now I could see the neck wasn't in the right spot. So in the area where the top of the neck is here, I might actually model the head coming out of that group of planes there. So I think I'm actually gonna grab a couple more of these planes and move them as a group like this and scale it, and then I'll start thinking about how I'm going to model the head. Now, normally when I make a 3D character like this one the reference image came from, um, normally I would model the body really briefly, way faster than this. I wouldn't get it anywhere near this close with modeling, and then I would come back in and build the head, um, and like the antlers and or the horns or whatever that kind of stuff separately, and then I would combine them together. If we do that in this, it's going to make super dirty mesh, just really bad mesh, and we don't want to start on that foot, so we're not going to do it. Um, but yeah, my normal workflow is just get the general shape as fast as I can, and then correct it with sculpting, and then I know I just have to retopologize later, but we're not doing that in this workflow. So we're going to avoid it. Okay, so these points here will serve as the head here in a minute. Yeah, so let me select those nicely. Let's turn off our front view, go to solid. Yeah, so maybe even with these ones here, we'll just extrude and start working on the head, but not yet. Just in maybe a minute. Okay, let's get a little of this stuff fixed first. So, in this area where basically we just need a little more detail, we'll have to add some edge loops. So we'll do that in a minute as well. Let's turn on the rear view reference actually. And so it's in the way. We don't want it to be in the way. We want it behind the model. So let's check this box up here to enable the selection. Make sure that the one by the reference image is selected. Okay, and then maybe I'll select that image. GUI. Oh, I'm in edit mode. Sorry, you got to go back to object mode to move other objects. Select the reference image, hit G and Y, move it out in front. Okay, so now when we look through the model this way, we'll be able to line up the detailing on the back side of it. Okay, so I'm going to select the model again, go back into edit mode. Okay, and we'll start to do sort of the same process. You can see from fixing the side view, we've widened the front view and the rear view again, so we're gonna start working on those a little bit. So I'll scale on X, Alt select, scale X, and I'll just work my way around these loops. Okay, so now here again, it's an important spot. It's going to be hard to make sure we're keeping everything set up the right way. It actually looks like this reference image is offset slightly, and my character's probably just not um, like uniform, so it's not necessarily our model that's the problem. But I just want to try to center the reference with the model a little bit better. Honestly, right at 0 might be as good as it gets. So, we have imperfect references, so we have to fill in the gaps on our own, basically. But yeah, so we're gonna have to add some extra topology in here in a second, but we can still fix legs. So let's just keep doing that. I would say one thing we can also do here is we can start to scale these planes a little, because we know that the legs aren't going to be this squared off, so we can start to just scale the planes on the back face to make them smaller, and that'll kind of round the leg out. Okay, see, it's kind of giving it a little bit of like curvature. We don't want to do too much in this area yet. But we can definitely fix some of our loops down here. G. Okay, now I'm actually rotating around Z a little bit as well. Just because I know the flow looks rotated. Okay, and another thing to note is that it looks like our reference isn't scaled as much here as the side view seem to be. See, the feet line up in the side view, but not in the rear view. That's another problem that you'll have with reference images, especially if they're renders like this, because this render was, it's done in perspective, just like any camera or a drawing or whatever. So, you know, if you line up the feet on both, it might just be that our reference isn't scaled enough, but it might just be that the perspective makes it hard to set the references properly. So let's try to move this over to the side view and see. Yeah, and you can see the horns on the back view here are just a little bit smaller. The other thing we can do, let's undo that, is turn on the front view again and compare them. There's not going to be a super easy way to do this, but we can already see that the back view one's smaller, so let's just scale it. Not a lot closer. Let's turn off the front view. And now if we look, it looks like the feet line up better. So we're probably doing good there. So I'm going to lock those again and select our body. Go back into edit mode. Okay, and now here's a good example of where you can start adding some of the definition to the body. We know from reality that this model probably won't have flat sides like this. If you want to make it that way, you can, but it just doesn't look right. If you're going for a somewhat realistic shape. So here, I would actually start grabbing um, these edges up here and pulling them out to the side to correct this distance that we have between our current model and the reference. So I'll hit GX. Okay, and now that's going to start creating some of that round shape that we would expect to see on a character. And the great thing about 3D modeling is it's all by eye, and you can fix it on the go. You don't have to redraw it per se. So to me, it's just super easy to come in, make a change, see if it looks good. Which I think is part of the reason that 2D, and drawing might be harder than 3D modeling. Okay, now all I'm doing here is trying to block out the shape of the body a little. Because bear in mind, we can add edge loops whenever we want to. So let's actually start planning to do that. So I'm going to move this point up because realistically, the legs would split here. This would be kind of more of a rounded curve. And then these ones would probably line up a little better. So some of this is going to come from the rotation of the legs being a little weird. Like down here, you can see that there's definitely z-axis rotation. But let's start to pull some of these out too. That'll help. And there's actually plenty of tools that we can use later to correct the topology. So without retopo, without changing the modeling, we can actually have Blender relax all of these points so that they smooth out and kind of average between each other. And we'll do that in just a little bit. But that makes the effort of smoothing it very easy. Okay, so now at this point, I've been just kind of going off on my own. The reference image isn't going to match anymore because his legs aren't just a straight line like we see from this back view. They're going to be, they have more of that shape to them. So we have to start kind of modeling it with our eyeballs instead of just using the reference. GX. Okay, and then this is giving him a little bit of a flat face on the side. If you want it to round even more, just grab a vertex and move it in the X, but for now we're not going to do that. Yeah, I think pull a couple of these lines up. And just remember, if you hit G twice to move, it just follows the lines. So it's not going to mess up your topology very much. So if I want to move this whole loop, I can just double tap G. And it just makes life a lot easier. Okay, so here's one spot I want to add some topology. So I'm going to hit Control R and add, let's just add one loop for now. Put it back toward the back here, and then I'll hit Scale. Okay, and this will give his leg a little bit more of that calf muscle shape. And then around joints, you want normally at least 3 loops. So I'll actually rotate that about X slightly, and then I'm going to add another loop down here, bring it up toward the top, scale by X, and then these points got out of hand here, so let's move those back in. And what you want to do is just kind of keep the spacing between points somewhat even. If you don't, the flow of the model won't make a lot of sense. So if the leg is twisting as it goes, it's going to be really hard to deal with later. And what you should think is this line of planes should continue all the way down the same, like, furthest back point of the leg. So, and all the way up the back and over the head and up to his nose. So like this line should stay consistent the whole way. If you keep that flow, it's going to be super easy to deal with later, especially when you're like rigging and stuff. Okay, let's look at our side view a little. We can definitely start doing some scaling to define his legs better. So we'll go by the Y direction. I'm going to add a loop in here. Put it maybe a little lower than halfway. Then we'll scale by Y. Okay, and that's just giving it a little bit of that thickness for the hoof. And on this guy, I may not actually model the hoofs like this. I might just leave them as generic shapes. I'm trying my hardest to do it in low poly and not just add extra details for no reason. Okay. So here I'm just smoothing out the flow a little bit. Again, we'll use the tools that are better made for that in a minute. Okay, I'm going to take these and move them out a little. I think his legs still looked like it was kind of twisted a little bit. Okay, we'll move this back. Okay, and same idea applies here. Try to keep your lines fairly spaced out evenly so that we don't have weird flow going on. We want to be somewhere in the middle on this part. Okay, and how about that one? So now that we've got a little bit of extra detail on the legs, let's go back to object mode. And you can see it in smooth shading mode. It looks quite a bit better already. Even the legs versus the arms just make a bit more sense. And then, our topology flows somewhat well. We'll get it to where it's great here in a minute. Edit mode. And one thing to note while you're modeling is you want to start with large details first. Just block everything out and then move into smaller detail. And I think here we need to actually set our reference image a bit smaller because that got way too big. So let's maybe do that. Move it down. That was mostly for the legs anyway, so it's not going to matter, but yeah, we can start adding some detail here around his midsection. All right, so there's a couple things to watch out for with edge loops. If you just start adding them all over the place, you're gonna have problems. So we want to be careful with those. You can definitely add loops in here because you're just adding a loop to this set of faces. But I wouldn't add any vertical loops yet. So this one we're going to use to help define this part of his leg better. And then, the topology doesn't copy if we don't have the mirror modifier on. So when we add a loop like that, just select all, mesh, symmetrize, plus X to minus X, click, and there you go, you're good. So it copied that loop to the other side. Okay, now start planning how we want to do this. So I'm going to start bringing these points in a little bit, and we will have to add some loops vertically, but it's better to actually add loops that start and end inside the topology, and I'll show you a little bit of that as we go. But what I mean by that is don't come in here and say, oh, he doesn't have enough detail on his leg. I just am going to add like 10 here because, you know, doing this, you're getting super high poly right away for no reason. So definitely don't want to do that. But what we can do is say we need more detail here. Um, we can start and stop topology as we go across. So we'll start like up here and we'll split it to get more detail, and then we'll collapse it by the time it gets back to the leg. So that's more of a fine detail part that we'll do later. Okay. What do we have for loops? Now I would say we're gonna need a vertical loop on the legs like that anyway. So I'd say for now let's just add one. Okay, I don't want to go adding like 10. So we'll add one there. We'll do our mesh symmetrize one more time. Okay, now we've got this thing is fairly smooth looking. Okay, I'm gonna come back up here. Now I just jump around. If you're more organized and you're not a fan of, you know, switching what you're working on, then just don't. But I always see things that I want to change and I have to bounce around. Okay, this point definitely sticking out too far. Don't really want him to have a bump in his neck like that. So these I'm going to move out in the X direction. These will move back a little. Okay, this isn't going to matter because that's going to turn into his head, so let's not get too crazy there. Um, okay, this I might actually start to bring up. So you can see what I've done here is I've created this shape. This is going to be kind of like where his neck attaches to his head. So that'll be a good starting point for that. I'm going to move these around, move this in, and then these can go forward slightly. And I'm just rounding the neck out again so that um, it's not as squared off later, just depending on how we want to give him muscle and stuff like that. And we'll definitely need to add some loops here because we're not going to want to deform an arm that has such low topology. We don't need a lot more, but maybe a little more. So I'll go ahead and add a loop that goes all the way across. Just put it low. And then maybe we'll add another one in a little bit. Now, one thing I've just thought of is there's a great reference is if you just Google base meshes, you can see how really good topology flows. Mine is okay. It's not going to be like perfect, so it can definitely help just to see what expert level retopology looks like. Because even for low poly, you know, the same rules are going to apply. You just have fewer planes to work with. So definitely just Google clean topology or something like that, and you'll find good references. And you could literally say, okay, how do they go from a shoulder to the arm, and just kind of follow that same pattern, and you'll get a really nice product really fast. Okay, and I'm just trying to make this corner look as nice as I can. It's important at this phase to not get too worried about it because we'll have to change things later. And you definitely don't want to be creating bad topology, so be careful moving stuff around. Oh, okay, and I think we're going to turn off the rear view. There we go. So one of the tools that I use a lot that I didn't talk about yet is the um, proportional editing. So if I turn that on and I hit G to move, it's going to bring up the circle. The circle is how much the tool will influence the model. So use the scroll wheel to change the size of that wheel or that circle. And so if I scroll it all the way in, I'm only going to move the one point I selected. If I scroll out a little bit, it's going to start to influence points around it. And then if I get real big, it'll do everything. So this can be a super nice tool for, like say here I wanted to bring the chest out a little bit, or actually right here is a great example. I'll hit G to move, scroll in a little, okay, and then I'm in the move command, so I can hit Y and just move this out a little bit in the Y direction, and it moves the points next to it as well. So I'll hit G, Y, maybe move these out a little, and then I'll actually G, Y one more time and scroll it in and kind of make this little split in the chest area. But it's great for things like grabbing this entire corner and um, pulling it in, stuff like that. So you can really move a lot of the points around without having too much of a manual labor. And we'll go through the smoothing tool for the topology in a little bit, but we're not to the point where we're going to use it yet. Okay, so there's more work to be done in certain areas for sure, but for now, I think we've got the general shape of it blocked in. So I think we should start working on the head, at least briefly. Um, yeah, his legs are kind of the right shape. I'd say I'd say we can actually let's get just a couple more of these loops set up. I'm going to turn off proportional editing. It's one of those tools that you don't want to use on accident. You don't want to grab a whole lot of stuff when you didn't realize it. Okay, I'm just moving some of these loops to the back. They look too far forward. Yeah, that's probably better. Because we want to shape the body in general first, and that was definitely looking kind of flat. All right. Let's move some of these around just to make them a little bit smoother. If you start doing too much of that manually, you'll probably chase your tail per se, because um, you'll just chase the twisting effect around the circle. So there's only so much you can do, and it's one of those things where you might as well just kind of fix that later. But I was thinking this leg looks a little too thin, so thought I should beef it up a bit. Um, yeah, let's maybe pull this out forward a little bit, because that'll kind of start to show us what the knee will look like. I'd say we'll end up needing topology right in here anyway, since we have one loop here and then one loop here will be right in the middle. And then let's add another one up here and pull it down. That'll just help us kind of form up the knee a little bit. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely need some more topology around this front side of the legs here in a while, but we'll deal with it in a bit. Get a little of that twisting going on, that's all right. We'll deal with it later. But he's kind of got defined knees now, a little bit. He's got a definite split in his body, so he's got the legs make more sense just from the view of it. Let's go to flat shade and then back to smooth. Okay, so that's what the body's looking like so far. Pretty straightforward. Get back in edit mode. All right, now I'm gonna just get enough detail to pull the head off of it. Now, keep in mind, whatever we take from here is going to shape his head. So, you want to plan the shape of it a little bit, but really it's just like for this model, it's kind of just a triangular tube almost. So when I model this for sculpting, I would almost start with a cone actually. So you might not want to get too much of this detail because it's not gonna be helpful, if that makes sense. So I can grab these like this, but that's going to cause a problem. I can extrude like this. The one thing to make sure is you don't want to add any planes inside of the model, because that'll make texturing really complex, and we don't want to do that. So for now, we'll just extrude this, and yes, that looks ridiculous, but that's all right. So I've still got all these faces selected. I'm going to come to the side view. I'm going to place them about where the nose is, rotate, scale, kind of get that triangular shape started. Okay, now I'm going to make sure there's nothing wrong with it, like I didn't cause any folds. There's not angles that are too harsh. And it looks fine. So we'll add 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 4 loops for now. Okay, and then I can select each of these loops and then just go into my X-ray mode again and whoops, hit X instead of S. That was close. And I'm just going to do this by selecting each loop, rotate, scale. And what's cool is the topology, like here, the topology got folded up a little. Didn't cause any problems. It'll just keep its shape. Scale. Okay, and really, I'm just trying to block out the shape of this with as little work as I can. Okay, maybe we'll just go this way. Scale it up one more time, bring it in. Okay, so now the one problem we've created here is we have this bunching. We may not want that. So we'll bring his neck back a little just to be safe. And it'll be a little hard to see in X-ray mode. SY. Okay, and then this loop for his head probably doesn't need to be quite where it is. This one and this one we can move forward just to correct our shape a little bit. Yeah, and then shockingly, it's already kind of starting to be the right shape, sort of. So uh, we have a great starting point. We haven't created any triangles yet, all quads. I would say we're probably going to want to pull these points out a little more, so we'll do that. But this should still be somewhat of a loop in here. Okay, so we only need to grab one side because we're mirroring. And just bring this down a little. Maybe select these two. Bring them forward. Okay, and then I just need to remember it's low poly. I don't need to model it like I would normally for a high resolution one. Okay, so that's actually a really good starting point. Turn on our front view again. Okay, now it actually is kind of nice to have that view of his head right there. We want to make sure we have stuff aligned. You can see the side view. It looks like his head's the right shape. If you look at the front view, it's definitely not. So we're going to adjust the front view a little bit. Now, obviously, you can make it whatever you want. Make his head bigger or smaller if you want to. I'm just going to try to stick to the side view because I think it's more complete. So I'm going to actually scale down the front view reference slightly and just maybe do something like that. And you might say, what good is the reference if you keep changing it? But really, that's all it is, though. It's a reference. So do whatever you need to. And once you're used to it, you shouldn't be using the reference for the design of it. You'll be using the reference just to get started and really for proportions and scale and stuff. And when you're really good and past my expertise, you'll be able to do all of that just by eye. And um, you won't need a reference like this on the screen for you. You know, you'll be able just to look at one off on a different screen or an image of something and model it. Yeah. No, this actually looks really good to start. So go back into edit mode and start moving some points around. Now here it's going to be a little bit harder to see what exactly we're doing. So at this point, you're going to have to start modeling just by, by what you think you should be doing. And I'm going to turn back on the proportional editing here just so I can shape some of this. Like I know he's going to have a wide forehead, but his nose isn't going to be very wide. So we'll grab stuff like this and we'll pull it in. Okay. And bottom of his chin and the front of his nose won't be very wide. So we'll move those in a little bit. We can leave that because we will actually model a little bit of a mouth and teeth for him. Maybe like that. Okay, now this is kind of a good flow for his forehead. But let's maybe move this back up a little bit. Not quite that much. I don't want him to be spikes on his eye. Let's move this. And we'll model the horns separately, so we'll do that in a minute. Okay, and one thing I do want to do is just um, make his head rounded there a little bit. I'm actually going to bring these back slightly. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing. Just making it a little smoother. And again, I'll use a tool to really do the trick here in a little bit. That's actually looking decent. Now I'm going to go into face select mode and select this loop and just scale it down a little. Okay, now that's going to give him that kind of thin middle of his face. Yeah, so when we do things like eyes or honestly like the butt cheek area, that kind of stuff, we will add topology by creating it out of these points, and then we'll collapse it by the time we get back into the rest of the body. So that's how we'll do his eyeballs. I'm going to round his neck out just a little bit too. And then his head can be the same way. Cool. Let's see, what else does he need? I know that this area can come in a little bit. Maybe not too much though. We do want to keep that definition. And then he'll kind of have like this hard eyebrow. It'll be sort of more of a rigid point on his face. Yeah, but we have decent topology to start with. So this will be a lot easier to work with from the get-go instead of my normal workflow for like this guy, the original that this reference is a render of, is just to throw some shapes on and start sculpting like crazy. So there's really no um, method or means to it in the beginning. And here we're just trying to be intentional up front so that we don't have a bunch of stuff to fix later. I'm gonna grab his jawline here and just kind of get that set up. Okay, so that's a good start for his head. Um, Looks like here his horn's not very wide, so we probably want a smaller area to work with on that. So I'm tempted to add an edge loop there, but it's really not one we need. So let's just do it. And then if I turn this off, we've got um, kind of this spot for a horn to come off of maybe. And maybe this one will work on for the ear. So if we want to start that, we can. So let's just be super, super quick. I'll just move this back, rotate it a little. Well, rotate Z, extrude, GY, rotate Z, extrude, GY, rotate Z. Okay, so now we've got this thing going on. Guess it depends on how we want to make it look. And so the other thing we can do in a second too is we can um, we can modify this in a pretty simple way just by adding some edge loops. So I'll show you that in a second. Okay, and I want to do everything I can to maintain quads and keep everything even. So I'm going to try not to make too much twisting in these. I don't think it's going to really matter, but we don't want problems later. That's looking pretty cool. We might make them a little thicker though. And like here, I always think horns and antlers and stuff are kind of fun to model just because you get to play with them. There's no real right answer, so maybe make this thick. Let's see if we can select this edge loop here. And then we can just scale that up. And that'll kind of also naturally give it the bump at his head. And then we can come back and add some of that detail later. Okay, so that, I think for now, that's actually pretty cool. I'll leave that. And then we'll do the same thing basically with his ears. So I think this plane here is a good one. So I'll look in the front view. I'll just say extrude. And we'll just place it right there. Now if I want to be able to add some detail in here, I don't have to extrude, rotate. I can just get this first plane to look okay, and then add a few edge loops, and then just do those ones. So kind of the same idea, but if you want to just go right to the end and then adjust in the middle, you can do that too. Not letting me select this loop. Apparently it doesn't like that loop. Okay, and then I will scale that down a little. Rotate. Okay. So here's what that looks like now. So pretty quick. Once you're used to the tools, it's very, very fast. Um, you know, hands will be kind of like the horns in the ear. We'll have to do a little bit of detailing to get the body to be slightly more realistic. But yeah, so far we're only at, let's see, we're only at 768 vertices. So as far as poly count goes, we're doing really well. Let's turn off our reference images. I mean, here's what the mesh looks like. So super easy to work with. We've got decent flow. I think one thing that we'll do here though, before we get too crazy, is we'll symmetrize again. Okay, so I'm doing plus X to minus X because my plus X side had the horn in the ear. Okay, and then boom, done, that's it. So all the changes we made just on the one side, I just applied to the other side. Yeah, what else do we need here? We might need, so eventually we may need a little bit of an extra loop on the ear. If we can play it right, I might add a loop all the way around the face this way. And then I'll use that to make his eyes too. So we'll wait on that. I think for now what I'll do though, this stream is getting to be 2 hours now. So I think what I'll do is I'll start to add some hands. And then, man, his head definitely looks a little small, doesn't it? That's all right. We'll fix the scaling later. Um, I'll start his hands just so you can see, the body being really close to blocked in, and then we will call it for now, and then we'll come back here in a few days maybe and keep going. I know these streams, it's long. It's going to be long. I can recut it and make a video out of it. Hopefully the buffering isn't too bad, but this stuff just takes a long time. That's all there is to it. Even experts aren't gonna do a character every single day. They might do some kinds in a day, but um, when you start out, it's gonna seem like, man, this takes forever, and that's just because it does. If I do a fully high detailed 3D character, high poly model and stuff, it's 40 to 100 hours of labor, probably partly just because I'm not great, I'm not an expert yet, but it's definitely a learning process, but it's a lot of fun. And the cool thing about 3D modeling is that you can adjust on the fly, so you don't have to commit to anything. I always thought drawing was intimidating because I couldn't adjust it on the fly. You could make a mistake and then you messed up your drawing. But to me, this is a lot harder to do that with. Let's rotate this a little bit. Then we'll move it in. How about that? Kind of looks shouldery. But yeah, so I'm gonna start throwing some hands on real fast so you can see that it's there, and then um, we'll have to get back together soon, and hopefully, hopefully everybody finds this stuff useful, and it's not just me blabbing for no reason. Um, which if that's the case, then so be it. But I think he's looking cool. That's what I think. That's just my opinion. Not that I have any bias toward it, since I made him or anything like that. But what else? Okay, so then that's the other thing. When I get through a whole segment of this, I'll try to share the file, and then if you want to pick up on working on it where I left off, you can do that. So I want you to be able to learn from the file, just in general, like whether or not you were able to follow along or if you even wanted to, you'll be able to get something out of each part if you want to start with, um, something that already has progress. So I'll probably get a decently clean version of this model ready to go, and then I'll post it on the Patreon site where hopefully everything is just free and easy to download. It's supposed to be now, and you might have to become a member to get it. I don't know. It just happened today, so haven't had a lot of testing done yet. But yeah, we're gonna have a couple issues we need to work out with we'll just call it the split in the body here, but we'll figure it out. So, all right. So I'm gonna go one last little bit tonight. I'm going to line his hands back up because I've moved this reference. I'm gonna move the image back slightly. Okay, and actually that looks like it lines up okay, so I'll just move it up. Yeah, I think that's really not too bad. Okay, and then I suppose maybe it could be a little bigger. Scale, move it down. Yeah, see now I'm thinking the head's going to be too small, but I'll show you later that's super easy to fix, so we'll do it then. Um, Click on that guy, go back to edit mode. Okay, now we can see our reference. So I'm just going to grab these planes that are on the front face here. Now, the one thing I'll say about hands is that just like in drawing, they are very difficult to make. So I don't have a ton of really great tips for hands, to be honest. I think I've figured out a way to retopologize high detailed ones, but um, you know, if we're gonna have one part of this character where the mesh gets bad, it's gonna be the fingers. And I'll show you why in a second, but that's not a bad start. The problem is each finger is gonna need an edge loop to go around. And like right now we only have um, 8 planes total around the whole arm, so we just don't have enough topology. So we're gonna have to start splitting the topology back here further, so that we can basically keep our flow but have the fingers look decent by the time we get there. So, and the reason we're doing it this way is because I don't want to create triangles. I don't want to skip any corners. We're going to do this entirely in quads, and you'll see why when we get to UV unwrapping and texturing. But yeah, so what we're going to have to do is let's extrude this one more time maybe, and we're just going to start kind of messing with topology. So these two here, I think, are going to just kind of end up being the pinky area. And then I have to figure out how to get enough topology from this line to the fingers so that I can make them all. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But I'll show you some tricks to do it. So I don't want to add a loop. I guess I could probably use maybe one here. Um, let's see. Does that make a triangle at the chest area? No, that should be okay. So I'll make another one up here that can help us with the index fingers. But I don't really want to add a whole lot more. So I can bring these in. See, we're still dealing with quads on there. What it's doing is it's switching the flow from the chest or from the side over here up and into his arm. So if you kind of follow a set of planes, you can see this one goes up. If you're in the next one over, it turns and goes down the arm. So when people talk about topology flow, that's what they mean. It's really important for motion and stuff like that to make sure that that is done the right way. Take these, move them along, maybe just move them up. Okay. So now what I could do is I could come in here and extrude these and have 2 fingers started. But I don't know that I want to do that yet. So maybe we'll just start with 1. So, okay. I'm not going to have as much to do on the back side of it. So I'm going to start with this edge and I'm going to try to stretch it to a finger. Yeah, let's actually just try that. Let's try this. New method here. This might work, it might not. We're going to turn off proportional editing, and I'll start to make this kind of wedge shape. Okay. So now we've got this big blocky triangle in the middle. I think what I'm going to do is delete a couple of these faces. And you can already see we've got like a finger-ish looking set of topology going on. So um, what I'm trying to do is get the general shape and then cut and add loops until it's what we want. Okay, so I need one here, and then another one here. I'm trying to decide, for this model, I probably don't need the gaps between them. So maybe I'll just subdivide this. So that can go there. Another one will go here. Okay. So, whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Subdivide. Okay, now what I want to do is draw this as a line. This is a line. And it looks like I'm trying to create a triangle there, but I'm not. So I'm gonna subtract, or I'm gonna subdivide these one time because we do have that detail there. Okay, so we have enough um, to create a quad here. It's not gonna be cute, but it'll work, and it'll allow us to keep our edge flow going. Yeah, so let's bring these. Let's bring these out, and now you'll see what I'm trying to do here. So let's fill this guy and fill this guy. Okay. And then, yes, I know it doesn't have edges yet. Um, that isn't very helpful there. Okay, so now he's got 3 awful fingers started. Let's look through this and see if we can position this better though. Okay. Yeah. So let's create another line here. Create another edge, subdivide once. Okay, so now we've got um, cheater faces here, here and here and here and here. Nope, nope, missed. Okay, now I filled this, and if you look, it's kind of cheating, but it's still a quad. Okay, because it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 faces. We'll fix the topology of it in a second, but for now I just need to I need to get it to function or to line up, and then we'll come back and actually make that work. Okay, so I'll just fill them. We're going to need to do the same process here, basically. Let's do it this way. Let's just fill this. And then I'll subdivide that. Nope, we don't want that many. We'll select this line, subdivide, select this one, subdivide. Since this is already a plane, I'll have to use the knife tool, which is K, and then draw a line between these. Oops, I missed. That'll snap to a dot, that'll snap to a dot, hit enter, and now I've created a new cut there. So I'll position that kind of where a finger goes. And then I can start to scale these. Get them placed where they go in general. Rotate, rotate. Okay, fill in between the fingers. subdivide, cheat, cheat, fill in, subdivide, cheat, and cheat. All right. So, does not look great yet, but it will do the job here in a second. So now I can take these objects, move them back, rotate Z, try to get them kind of in the corner there. This one has to come back to X, this comes back to X. Okay, those are good, those are good. If this was high poly, I would definitely be trying to do something else. But this is, I think this is actually going to work all right. Okay, so it's not pretty yet, but it will be, I promise. And like I said, hands are the worst part of any part of art that I've ever experienced. So, you know, if you know how to do hands, then congrats, you've won the game, I think. But so now if you look at these, every single one of these objects is still four-sided. Even these in here that don't look like it. So the benefit is I can come in here and loop around these things without causing problems. So if I want to add a loop down the middle of the finger, I can do that. The one thing that we don't have anymore is we don't have enough topology down the arm to support this sort of funny business. So we're going to have to splice these out. But if I want to add some edge loops in here, which I probably should, then I can just do that. And then, okay, this one is wanting me to go down the entire arm. I don't really want to do that. One thing we can get away with is adding one in between here. Okay. So I'll add that one, and that gives me a way to tie this back in without any sort of effort. Okay, so if I just draw from here to here with the knife tool, I've created this plane and this plane. Same thing back here. Okay, go to there, enter. All right, still not making triangles. The only problem is now we have this thing, which has all these little sides connecting. So one way to fix it is cheat. And let's just make 2 extra edge loops here. Okay. Now I can knife between these. So all I'm really doing is just adding more detail to where I think I'm going to need it. Okay, so now what happens? Yep, creating triangles. Don't want to do that. So everything's still kind of a quad. We do still need a thumb, which we'll get that pulled out here in a second. I would say we can definitely grab a bunch of these faces. Go by the Y. Okay, and then in this area, oops, don't want it to be raised. Right here it will be, I guess. But the thumb will kind of help take care of that. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to see if I can make decent topology with these loops here. One, two, three, four, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now at this point, if you had to add triangles, you could. It's just going to mess up our topology flow, so we're going to avoid it. But you know, it's not going to destroy your work. It's just going to make certain steps later not as easy. So we'll do what we can to avoid it. So anytime, this is, I wouldn't call it a pro tip, but I've learned this from retopologizing. Anytime you have two triangles next to each other, like this, you can dissolve the face in between, and you end up with another quad. Okay? So the problem is doing it in the way that makes the topology flow very well is somewhat of a challenge. And keep in mind, this is um, one way, one style. Some some styles would actually call for tries, and a lot of game development will use tries, not quads. And I believe it's something about tries can be more efficient in certain game engines. It's definitely a little technical, but yeah, I just don't want to be making any triangles for this model though, because like I said, it's intended to be a game character eventually. It's just not. It's just going to take a long time before I ever get to that point. 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's that one we need to fix, and this one we need to fix. So um, maybe I'll just dissolve this. And then I can run this out to here. Why are you not letting me do that? Delete this face. And then let's just cheat again and fill this in. Okay, so getting some pretty weird shapes going. But yeah, so this is part of the problem. This is what I was talking about before. If you start messing with your topology, you may be um, you may be able to avoid adding triangles, but you're going to be chasing yourself with some other part of the topology. So, like now that I've done and messed with this, I've got a bunch of these weird rotated faces, and they're fine except they start to deform within the plane, and that's not going to look right. Okay, so now you've got these curved planes here. Basically, it's telling you that it wants a line there. Let's see now. If I if I cut these, I might be able to add some loops. And I don't want them to they don't have to look great. They just have to work. All right. So, yeah, we're chasing out triangles, but we're causing other problems. This is called um this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. So normally in Blender we'll just call that an n-gon, which means it's just a bunch of sides for no reason. So one thing we can maybe do, let's just subdivide these and see what they do. That actually worked okay. So let's save the file and then I think I'm just going to backtrack all this. Okay, rebuild this. Rebuild this. Um, and then that's more like that one. Oops, not what I wanted. I wanted to fill. Okay, and then now this won't make any sense for a second, but it will when I figure out why I did it. Oops. Complete the edge. And then how did I get that to come out of there? All right. Anyway, well, so basically what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to get um, all of these pulled out basically like this. So I need to actually only have the one line here. So maybe I'll just dissolve this again. But I'll tinker with it a little bit, and then once I get a um, a decent model, I'll send it out so everyone can have it, and then we'll go from there. But oh, I see what it's doing. It's the wrong vertice. Yep. Anyway, um, for now, I think I'm gonna call it good. I actually have to go back to work for a minute, so um, I'm gonna go take care of that. But if you've made it this long, that's impressive. I mean, these are super super long, and I appreciate you sticking around. It's just a lot of work, and having people that support it feels great. I mean, it's just you know you don't you don't get that support everywhere, so um, it's just a lot of fun to be able to show everyone what I got going, and hopefully hopefully I'll be able to get you some better shorter versions of this kind of content. But I'll just keep working on them, and um, we'll figure out what everybody likes. So let me know in comments, let me know in the chats, wherever. Just tell me what you think I can show you, and um, I'd love to learn what I can learn from you as well. So anyway, watch for a post. I'll have a new I'll have a new version of this model that you can download so that it's on the same step, basically, as this is currently. And then if you want to follow along in the future, you can. But thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.